I'm Mike Uyak. I love to try new things, and I've had culinary adventures all around the world as well as right at home. I've had really wonderful food, as well as some really horrible food. I'd like to share some of my adventures with you, and we'll see if I have what it takes to fix whatever goes wrong. This is Recipe Redemption.
Hi everybody, Mike Uyak here for Recipe Redemption. It may seem like I'm on a vegetarian kick. It's just a theme that's kind of coming up lately. Mostly because I ran across this in the store. Little sticker says it's on sale. It's a manager sale. So I thought, why the heck not? This is Light Life plant-based ground beef. So it's basically like Impossible Burger, but different brand. And it's comparable in price at the moment because it's on sale to an actual pound of a real ground beef. That's kind of been my main complaint. Well, aside from quality and flavor, texture, aroma, etc., my main complaint about vegetable-based meat substitute substances is that they're still on average more expensive than the meat that they're supposed to replace. Sometimes just a little bit more, and so the difference is, I guess, palatable, if you'll pardon the phrase. It makes it worth it to actually make the switch if you're in a vegetarian or vegan lifestyle. But a lot of other products are not. They are sometimes 2, 3 times more expensive than what they're replacing, sometimes more. So the fact that this is actually comparable in price to a real pound of ground beef really sold it for me. Want to try it, see if it is indeed as good as beef. I got two brands. This one because it was on sale, and because I've decided I'm just going to go for this experiment, I got this one which was not on sale. The Emerge Simple Truth Emerge plant-based meatless grind is what they call it. And Simple Truth, I think, is Kroger's actual in-house brand. So this is actually this whole thing of fake ground beef or vegetable-based ground beef. Let's not call it fake. Has gotten enough traction that we now have generic brands of it, which is interesting. Now, if you look really closely at it, and I don't know if it'll show up on the camera, but if you look really closely at it, you'll see that it has just a slightly different texture. It's extruded from a grinder, just like ground beef, but it does have just a slightly more granular texture to it than real ground beef. We'll see how it cooks up. Now, according to the ingredients, they're both similar. I'm assuming they're in slightly different formulations or whatever. But basically, you've got water, pea protein, textured pea concentrate. This has got canola oil. This one's got coconut oil, pea protein, expeller pressed canola oil. That's in both of them. Modified cornstarch. Yep. Yeast extract, sea salt, cultured dextrose. Okay, sure. And then they got beet juice. In this case, beet juice powder, and this one, yeah, beet powder. That's what gives it its nice red color. I think in the Impossible Burger, and there's one other, they make it. I think they actually add that at the last minute before packaging. So when you cook it, your burger actually bleeds a little bit because it's a little bit more rare on the inside than on the outside. And oh, by the way, because these are vegetable, you can actually get away with cooking them sort of rare, whereas with a burger, that's so some people enjoy them with a little bit rare, a little bit pink in the center. But you always have that little caveat you'll see at the bottom of every menu these days. Serving undercooked meats carries with it a risk of bacterial and contamination. Blah 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 blah. Yeah, and they have some other spices: onion powder, garlic powder, turmeric for color. That's on. Actually, this one doesn't have turmeric, so it is mostly colored by the beet juice powder. Anyway, so I was kind of inspired recently seeing another YouTube video where someone had taken the same meat from a an Impossible Burger and made a completely vegan Philly cheesesteak that was supposedly indistinguishable from a real cheesesteak. I wanted to continue that trend using these ground beef substitutes for something other than a burger. So what I have in mind is souvlaki. I'm just going to basically make up skewers, spice it up, and broil it. I'm not going to grill it. I'm just going to broil it, and serve it on pita bread with some yogurt sauce, some hummus, and some greens. Hush. The other one I was thinking shepherd's pie. And I have a recipe that I have for a low carb shepherd's pie that replaces the mashed potato with a cauliflower mash. But I thought, why not make this a completely vegan, well, vegetarian anyway, shepherd's pie by also substituting the meat, and in that recipe it actually calls for ground bison, but I'm going to substitute with a plant-based beef substitute and see if it makes a satisfying shepherd's pie without the meat. So let's get started. Let's get started with this experiment. I'm curious to see how this turns out.
So here we have our substitute meat. Feels like ground meat. So to this, I'm adding some breadcrumbs just to help it all stick together, and a good handful, I'm going to call it maybe half a cup of za'atar spice. That is going to give it a nice sort of Mediterranean, Middle Eastern flavor, along with garlic powder, onion powder, and some freshly ground black pepper. Also, don't forget to actually season your meat. And just for a little extra zing, I'm going to add the zest of 1 lemon and a couple tablespoons of balsamic vinegar. It's also going to give it a little bit extra moisture. Now, yes, mixing with the hands. Don't be too shy about this. You're going to be using your hands anyway in a minute, so might as well just use the best mixing tool that mankind has yet to discover. Once that's all combined into a smooth paste, take a skewer and sort of form it into a little sausage around the skewer. And what you really want to focus on is making sure the skewer is right in the center of this little cylinder of meat. It's going to give it the greatest amount of stability. And place it on a baking rack and place in the oven 350 degrees. And this took probably about half an hour. While that's roasting, I'm going to take the juice from that lemon that I zested. Waste not, want not, don't you know? And to that, I'm going to add a little bit of salt, some more garlic powder, onion powder, you know the drill. I put that stuff in everything. I'm adding a little dill. I think it'll taste good. As well as some ground cumin. To this, I'm adding some yogurt. Now, in this case, I just happen to have some Greek yogurt lying around, so that's what I'm using. Plain, please. No blueberries or anything on the bottom. And stir to combine, and yes, this will take a moment to get it to incorporate, but it'll get there. And now, plating. I have my yogurt sauce, some pitas that I've sliced in half, a little bit of salad, and a couple of my souvlaki skewers. And now for a dish from the Northern Hemisphere. I have a head of cauliflower, which I quarter and core. I just take some of the woody bits out and place on a steamer. And surprise, surprise, as the name implies, I'm putting the steamer into a pot of boiling water to steam. About 20 minutes. Just until the cauliflower is soft enough that it will process into a smooth paste when I put it in the food processor, with a little bit of olive oil just to kind of lubricate everything. Oh, and a little bit of nutmeg. That's what the recipe called for. Set my cauliflower off to the side, and in the meantime, I'm browning another pound of my beef substitute. You can see it doesn't quite behave like ground beef once it's cooked up, but that's okay. And don't worry about those brown bits stuck to the bottom. Just add a little more oil once you've removed the meat and set that off to the side, and start sauteing your vegetables. First in, as always, some onion, along with mushrooms and carrots. In this case, you're kind of sweating these off anyway. It doesn't really matter, you're throwing them all in together. And I'm adding a little bit, probably a couple tablespoons worth of tomato paste. I may have mentioned this before, but I'm really getting turned on to the tomato paste in the tube. If I don't need a whole lot of it, I prefer it in the tube because then I can stick that into the fridge and save it for later. I don't have to open up a whole can just for a couple tablespoons. A little bit of Worcestershire sauce, and add the meat back in now. Yeah, as much of it as we can, sure. Let's be frugal. Oh, and don't forget a little bit of freshly ground black pepper and some beef stock, a couple cups. And that's it, time to assemble. First, put your imitation beef filling into the bottom, and once you've filled the ramekin about half full, scoop on some of your cauliflower mash. It doesn't have to spread out to completely cover the top, but just adequate coverage. And on top of that, some Parmesan cheese. It's going to give that nice crust and a nice little additional flavor to it.
Okay, to start, our vegan souvlaki. Obviously the pita with the hummus, some greens in it, the yogurt-based sort of tzatziki-like sauce that I made up, all of that is going to be your standard flavor for a sort of souvlaki, gyro type of thing. So really what we're judging is the meat substitute. So, so that granularity that I mentioned earlier comes through in the finished product. Now mind you, I did add, I did add a lot of za'atar. So there's a good bit of sesame seed that's kind of floating around in here, good bit of herbage. But even so, the meat itself has a texture that is not quite beefy. It's not quite meaty. In fact, it reminds me of falafel, which is not a bad thing, and it's a perfectly fine thing to put in a pita. But when you're expecting, beef or meat anyway, you could also do lamb souvlaki. It's just not quite right, but it's getting there. The texture's funny, the flavor's okay. It's still not beefy exactly, but it's to the point where you say, something's funny about this beef, not, that's not beef. It's getting closer, but I think they still have a little ways to go before they can really fool me into thinking that this is really beef. I look forward to actually trying an Impossible Burger at some point. I might actually do a video where I try one, just to see, does it fool me? So, I'm letting the vegan shepherd's pie cool a little bit because it was just under the broiler, so it's 100 zillion degrees, but let's go check on that. So, it's not an unattractive plate. I'm going to dig past the cauliflower mash because we're not really judging the substitution of cauliflower for mashed potatoes here. We really want to judge the meat and the shepherd's pie underneath. It's got good flavor. Chewing on little bits of substitute meat. Again, the granularity of the texture leads you to think it's not quite beef. Now, if you didn't know any better, you just know that something wasn't quite right, but you wouldn't be able to put your finger on it. It's edible. Yeah, I think it's perfectly acceptable. It's an okay replacement, but you kind of want to chew it a little more. It's like it's got whole oats in it or something. There's a little bit more of a sort of a starchy chew to it that does not make me think beef right off the top. But otherwise, it's quite tasty. So, yes, a lot of these plant-based substitutes like the Impossible Burger, the Beyond Meat, those sorts of things, they are getting to the point where you can substitute them. They make a reasonably satisfying substitute for ground beef. But it's still not an identical experience yet, and it's up to you as to whether or not that actually matters. If the supposed health benefits, the sort of ethical considerations, that sort of thing, if those things matter to you, then yes, it's a satisfying substitute for meat. If you're an avid, some might say committed carnivore, it might leave something to be desired because it still doesn't quite replicate the same experience that real meat has. Cauliflower mash is still very definitely cauliflower, not mashed potato. I'm okay with it, but when I really want mashed potatoes, I really want mashed potatoes. But that's beside the point. So, we've tried a couple of ground beef replacements, vegan ground beef replacements. They're both very similar in formulation, so very similar experience. They're getting there. This wasn't bad, but I think there's just a few more tweaks that they need to make before this is truly like a beef experience where I wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So with that, I'd like to thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more episodes of Recipe Redemption in the near future. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.